Welcome to our channel PsyVerge. Why do some people seem to effortlessly navigate life's complexity, while others struggle, stuck in loops of frustration? Why do certain individuals always seem 5 moves ahead? Not because they know more facts, but because they think differently. What if I told you that most of us were never taught the most fundamental algorithm that high-level intelligence depends on? Not in school, not at home, not anywhere. And without it, we're left vulnerable. Easy prey for manipulation, failure, and self-sabotage. From the time we're children, we're programmed with a basic framework. Learn information, memorize it, repeat it on a test. If you do that well, you're labeled smart. But is that truly intelligence? Memorization is mechanical. High-level intelligence isn't about knowing facts. It's about knowing how to think, especially under uncertainty. It's about patterns, probabilities, and positioning your mind where others don't even know a position exists. There's a psychological algorithm, a mental loop, that most people never encounter because it's too dangerous for mass education. It creates independent thinkers, people who can't be controlled by simple narratives, people who question authority, not out of rebellion, but because they see deeper structures. This mental algorithm is the feedback loop of self-revision. Think about it. Every decision you make is based on a model you hold inside your mind, a prediction of how the world works. But most people never consciously question their own models. They simply reinforce them. Every experience that matches their expectation becomes another brick in the wall of their certainty. Meanwhile, high-level intelligence works the opposite way. It constantly tests its own models. Every failure isn't a defeat, it's new data. Every contradiction isn't a problem, it's a signal. The smart person says, "Why did I not predict that? What assumption was wrong?" That's the loop. Self-revision. Recursive model updating. Schools reward right answers. Life rewards better questions. The mental algorithm I'm talking about begins with self-suspicion, the willingness to believe that you might be wrong, not occasionally, but constantly. That you are blind to your own blind spots. This isn't self-doubt in the emotional sense. It's epistemic humility. The realization that the world is too complex for your mind to grasp fully. So your models must always be temporary scaffolds, not permanent structures. Now ask yourself, how often were you taught to think this way? Were you ever rewarded for identifying your own cognitive errors? Or were you punished for being wrong? The truth is, most educational systems create an unconscious fear of error. Error equals failure, and so, we hide from it. But high-level intelligence depends on seeking error, hunting it, because every error is a chance to refine the model. Over time, this builds extraordinary adaptive power. Where others crumble under complexity, these individuals become anti-fragile. They get stronger with every shock. There's another layer to this. The world isn't just complex, it's adversarial. People manipulate, systems deceive, incentives distort the truth. The mentally rigid person clings to narratives. The mentally flexible person dissects incentives. They ask, who benefits if I believe this? What pressures shape this narrative? They think strategically, not sentimentally. This is where dark psychology enters. The algorithm of high-level intelligence isn't purely logical. It also maps power, hidden agendas, emotional leverage points. It asks, what's being unsaid? What's being implied? What fear or desire is being exploited? This kind of thinking turns you into a different type of player in the game of life. You're no longer reactive. You're no longer pulled by surface emotions or appearances. You're observing the observers, predicting the predictors. And yet, this kind of intelligence is dangerous for institutions. Why? Because institutions run on obedience, on mass belief, on uniform perception. Independent thinkers destabilize consensus. That's why you were never taught this in school. Let's go even deeper. The algorithm I'm describing is not purely rational. It's also psychological warfare against your own ego. Every time you discover a flaw in your thinking, your ego resists. It wants to defend its past judgments. But the intelligent mind treats the ego like an outdated operating system. It observes its emotional reactions without automatically obeying them. I feel defensive. Therefore, something important may be challenged here. That's the inner dialogue of someone running this algorithm. They see their own defensiveness as data, not as a signal to double down. At the core of this is what philosophers call metacognition, thinking about your thinking, watching yourself think, catching yourself making assumptions, spotting when you're filling in gaps with comforting stories instead of evidence. It's mentally exhausting, which is why so few people do it consistently. But it's also the key to real intelligence. When you master metacognition, you start seeing hidden variables in every situation. Emotional variables, social variables, narrative variables. You notice how people reveal themselves by what they emphasize, what they omit, where they avoid. Now consider the broader consequence of this algorithm. If you apply recursive self-revision not just to your thoughts, but to your behaviors, your habits, your strategies, you become exponentially more effective over time. Why? Because small corrections compound. Each error identified early prevents dozens of downstream errors. You don't just learn from your mistakes. You eliminate classes of mistakes entirely. You start thinking in terms of second-order consequences. Not just what happens if I do this, but what happens after what happens. Machiavelli understood this. In The Prince, he warned that fortune favors those who prepare for uncertainty. He wasn't advocating for paranoia. He was advocating for adaptive thinking. The ability to predict not just what might go right, but what might go wrong. The weak mind clings to hope. The strong mind calculates contingencies. And yet, our culture celebrates blind optimism because it's comforting. High-level intelligence is often seen as cold, even ruthless, because it sees too clearly how fragile our illusions are. But let's be honest. Who thrives when illusions collapse? The one who was ready to update their models. The one who was running the algorithm. This is why truly intelligent people often appear detached or even cynical. They're not cold, they're observant. They refuse to be intoxicated by surface appearances. They see how people use hope, fear, and belonging as tools of control. They refuse to be easy prey. And yet, this kind of thinking has a price. Isolation, alienation. When you see too much, you realize how much of human interaction is theater. Posturing, ritual, unspoken power plays. Most people don't want to dismantle these illusions because they make life feel safer. The person running the algorithm often feels alone, swimming upstream. But that isolation is also freedom. You're no longer chained to collective delusions. You see reality as it is. Raw, uncomfortable, but navigable. So the question is, do you want comfort or clarity? The two rarely coexist. The mental algorithm they never taught you in school doesn't promise comfort. It promises power. The power of seeing what others miss, of adapting faster, of positioning yourself strategically in a world full of hidden traps. In a world where attention is currency, where narratives are weaponized, where emotions are leveraged for profit and power, this kind of mental clarity is rare. But it's trainable. If you can tolerate being wrong, if you can dissect your own thinking with surgical honesty, if you can resist the ego's need for certainty, you can start running this algorithm today. You were never meant to be taught this, because a population trained in self-revision is hard to manipulate. It questions leaders, dismantles dogma, resists propaganda. Schools produce workers. This algorithm produces free thinkers, and the world has never had many of those, for a reason. So next time you face a decision, a belief, a claim, pause and ask yourself, what assumption am I making? What model am I running? What if that model is wrong? That single question is the doorway to the algorithm. And once you step through it, you don't see the world the same way again.